two Franks.
Yes, we have two Franks again tonight. But Frank Palmer refuses to be downgraded to Frank 2. He's hanging on to the #1 slot. And Texas Frank does not have a book. Otherwise, he'd be reading tonight. So you still got me reading. So I will be interrupting myself, but also feel free to interrupt away at any point as we're going through this. And so this is only the second session. We're still in the invitation to a further journey. We're going to pick it up on page Roman numeral 9. If you have the hardback. And Kathy, I think you had the paperback and it was 2 pages off or something like that. Is that what you said?
Yes, I think we're on Roman numeral 7, if it's the book.
I'm
same
on
page
9. We're on 9, so you're on 7?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're always 2 pages less than us. We'll see if that holds through for the rest of the book. That'll be interesting to see. So we left off right at the first complete paragraph on page 9. And we got into a long discussion on this idea of homesickness. That was a great discussion that we had last week. He's basically just talking about the invitation to a further journey. So he's talking about the second half of life, and he's kind of laying out the case for it right now. And he was talking about that there's usual crossover points between the first and second half of life. He sees those crossover points as a necessary suffering, a stumbling over stumbling stones and lots of shadow boxing, but often just a gnawing desire for ourselves, for something more, for what I shall call homesickness. And that homesickness was that desire to come back to full connection, to come back to full presence, to come back to a holistic sense of being one, both interiorly and exteriorly. So we spent a lot of time discussing that last week. So we'll pick it up right there. Unless, did anyone have anything that they wanted to lead off with before we get into the text? All right. So he says, I'm trusting that you will see the truth of this map. Okay, now this map is the shape of the journey that we've been talking about. It always involves the descent before the ascent, the Paschal mystery, the shape that we've been talking about for a long time. But now he's also overlaying on top of that this first and second half of life journey. First half of life being the exterior focus, second half of life being an interior focus. All right. So he's trusting that you will see the truth of this map. Yet it is the kind of soul truth that we only know through a glass darkly. And he's referring to 1 Corinthians 13:12, and through a glass brightly at the same time. All right, that's a little confusing. It's the kind of soul truth that we will only know through a glass darkly and through a glass brightly at the same time. Yet any glass through which we see is always made of human hands, like mine. All spiritual language is by necessity metaphor and symbol. The light, capital L, comes from elsewhere, yet it is necessarily reflected through those of us still walking on the journey ourselves. As Desmond Tutu told me on a recent trip to Cape Town, we are only the light bulbs, Richard, and our job is to remain screwed in. All right. That first line was of interest to me. The map. It's the kind of soul truth that we only know through a glass darkly and through a glass brightly at the same time. Can anyone riddle me that? What the heck is he talking about? We're going to see this soul truth through a glass darkly and brightly at the same time. So he develops that a little bit in the rest of the paragraph. Any glass we see is made of human hands, but the light comes from elsewhere, necessarily reflected through those of us still walking on the journey ourselves. A little bit opaque in this paragraph, it seems to me. Yeah?
Yes.
So what struck me, I think, is that, and Frank loves this, whenever I talk about endarkenment, Frank, he just can't help but roll his eyes a little bit there. But we've talked about this before. You know, enlightenment, you've got these straight lines and rays. So Nura is going to be the word for light in Aramaic. And it has to do with order. It has to do with harmony. It has to do with intelligence and clarity. And the analogy is the rays of the sun are straight and they're ordered and they're bright. That opposed to Hoshech, which is darkness. And that has to do more with the curling and swirling energies of wind and water. It has to do with the assimilation of nighttime as opposed to day. But both are necessary and both are complementary. And so really what happens is we approach the journey much more from the endarkenment, from a indirect method rather than enlightenment. And the analogy that I love to use is of the mule that falls into the well, and they can't get the well out they can't get lines down, they can't get him up. And so they just decide they're going to bury him down there. They weren't going to use the well anyway, so they're going to just fill up the well and sayonara mule. So they throw down a few shovelfuls of dirt, and the mule is freaking out, but he shakes it off. And then after a while, he's not freaking out anymore. He's not braying and making all this noise. As they look down, they throw down a shovelful of dirt on his back. He shakes it off, steps up, and just waits for the next one. And eventually he just walks out of the well. So that idea is when we find ourselves in the hole, what we want is enlightenment. We want those straight lines to come down to us and pull us directly out. What we get are shovelfuls of dirt. And it's an indirect way, but it layers up slowly by slowly. And eventually we are able to lift ourselves into the light rather than the light reaching down and grabbing us. But it's both enlightenment and darkenment at the same time. Now he's referring to Paul, saying that now here on earth we only see through the glass darkly, but then after death we'll see face to face. But I think we can see that there is both at the same time, even in this life. Endarkenment is the way of subtraction. It's the via negativa. It is the descent. But there is the ascent on the other side once we have taken this part of the journey. And so I think both are happening at the same time. He says, any glass through which we see is always made of human hands. Well, the filter through which we look at life is human. It's the sum of all of our experiences. And especially of our traumas and our hurts and the things from the past that are still dogging us and have created core beliefs and all that sort of thing that is coloring the way that we look at life. And the light comes from a pure source, obviously. But we're going to be operating both at the same time for as long as we're breathing here. So I think it's really important that we see that this is both at the same time. I know we've kicked that horse a lot about the descent before the ascent. So I don't know if we need to talk about that too much. But as he says, the light comes from another source. And so all we have to do with the light bulb analogy is to remain screwed in. You know, if we stay close to the power source, then that light is going to be available to us. Even though we're not going to be dealing with certainty, there's always going to be a certain amount of endarkenment here in the human condition. So I don't know if that's what it says to me. I don't know if y'all agree or if that even helps, but there you go. Any thoughts?
It helped.
Okay. What were you saying, Becky?
I just think that the struggle I have is with the and, that in my experience, they may be happening simultaneously, but I'm not perceiving them that way. So if I'm in the place of the glass darkly, I may not be feeling or experiencing a glass brightly at the same time. I may, in retrospect, be able to look and say, oh, that's why that happened. And, oh, that was a good thing. But at the time, not always.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I struggle with that a little.
Okay.
I second that big time.
My buddy.
Dark, the light, being Southern Californians, we like the beach. We often wear our sunshades, even at night. And I think it's a call to take the glasses and lenses off and to make ourselves translucent to the transcendence of it all in terms of our inner selves. Too often we block that off.
Okay. Becky and anybody else, Beth and anyone else who's having trouble with this, even though you may be walking through the endarkenment phases, aren't there moments where the light shines through, where all of that just kind of falls away? And no.
What world do you live in?
Seriously, there aren't moments where you can just get so involved in the moment that all of that stuff just for that moment is held at bay, and you just feel that meaning and purpose and connection again?
Nope.
No?
Well, Beth, I'm going to buy you a flashlight.
I think it almost feels to me more a little, we may be mincing words, a little sequential, that if I'm really in a dark place, which happens less so now, but there was a period, and I don't know, I would want it, I'd pray for it, I'd hope for it, I'd, I don't know, be on my knees, and then something might happen and there would be that light.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, we might just be mincing words here. I get that it comes, and I get that maybe it's always there and I just have my sunglasses on and can't see it. So maybe it has more to do with faith and my lack of in those dark places.
Mm-hmm. Well, the sunglass analogy is good in the sense that, yes, the light is always there. Obviously, the stars are always there, even in the daytime, right? They're just they're just obliterated for a moment. You can't see them. But this idea of endarkenment does not mean it's a depression. And let's kind of be clear about that. It doesn't mean that it's a depression, doesn't mean that it's a difficult time in your life. The endarkenment is that there isn't that kind of clarity yet, or there is that lack of being able to see something with a certainty. It doesn't mean that you're really depressed or down. It just means that you're not seeing clearly. There's still maybe that sense of homesickness, that sense of longing for something that is more clear or feeling more connected. But it shouldn't, endarkenment shouldn't be an analogy for depression. It's just a different quality of traveling, you know? It's still kind of curved, and it's still endarkenment in the sense that it's not direct and clear, and you have those flashes of those moments along the way, but that's coming from, like Rohr says, from a different source. It's when we can finally take the glasses off for just a moment, or forget about them, you know, just in our abandonment to the moment, and that loss of sense of self, then the glasses come off for that moment and the light is there, and then we come back inside the ego system, and we're back with our glasses back on again. But I think it's an awareness that the light is there, even if we're not really clearly seeing it at the moment. But it's both. The subtraction process of continuing to let go of things is that part of that endarkenment. But it's usually to a certain amount, I suppose, disorienting. But it doesn't have to be depressing.
Okay.
And I don't know if that helps.
Just maybe, you know, I'm too caught up in what happened, you know, when I walked into the room and Brady is bleeding out and they're going to rush him to the ICU. You know, there was no light whatsoever. And we lived with that for even after coding, which I didn't know was happening at the time. But, you know, they didn't know if he was going to make it after they got him out of surgery the second time with the first cancer. So I don't know, maybe, you know, now as I look back, absolutely see God's hand in this, and not just in, you know, his life being saved by, you know, very wise physicians and experts, incredible experts. But there was purpose there. But, you know, it was pretty dark, you know, and so I don't know if it's, you know, I go back to those situations. For my illness, I definitely, you know, in the very, very dark times, I had moments of enlightenment. But for his situation, you know, it was tough, and there wasn't a lot of light. I don't know, does that make sense?
It does. It does. Mm-hmm.
So I think in the normal course of events, you know, like in our life now, I know we, you know, his PSA went up, we thought, and, you know, it was like, ugh, you know, maybe prostate cancer is not responding to chemo anymore. And so, you know, but it was. So I don't know, it's maybe, you know, we're unique because we've been in such a, you know, wild situation for quite a few years now, but, you know, but I know God's there. We feel it. And as you look back, was it Moses was by the burning bush, Dave? You know, I don't know my Bible real well. Being a preacher's kid, I don't know this stuff.
Okay.
But it was at Moses where God said, I will walk, you can't see my face, no man can see my face, but when I walk by, you can see my backside.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes. It wasn't at the burning bush, it was later, but yes.
Later. Okay. Thank you. So definitely, you know, looking back, you can see God's hand in so many things, but boy, at the time. So am I misinterpreting that? Like with Becky brought up the and part of it. And it's like, wow, you know, there are many, many times it was the and part, you know, you couldn't feel it, you couldn't see it, but it came later, the backside.
Now, I can say that you're talking about an extraordinary circumstance and an event in your life. And this is not necessarily relating to that.
Okay.
For us in our culture, light and dark are such loaded terms. And so maybe for us, enlightenment and endarkenment are not the best phrases that we can use, because light and dark for us are surrogates for good and evil. And we use them also as euphemisms for, you know, very trying times, like you're talking about being in the dark as opposed to the light. But being in the light doesn't mean that you're euphoric or happy, and being in the dark does not mean that you're depressed necessarily. It's a different quality of seeing, sensing, a different quality to the presence, I think, maybe is the way that I would put it. Okay. Yeah, there are times when I feel that those straight lines and that clarity is there, and there's other times where everything seems kind of jumbled, but you're still pushing through. And so it's a different quality of the journey when you're in that descent phase, the subtraction phase, as opposed to the enlightenment phase. Frank, you want to say something?
Well, yeah.
Did that help?
Yes, it was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Frankie?
Well, yeah, no, I was Google searching, you know, because I was kind of reading along here and then Google searching. And I saw this, and this might be a little bit helpful when you hear the rest of the verse. So then, you know, basically, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I'll be known in part, but then shall I know even as I'm known. So this gentleman, as he's quoting this, he says, it was best explained to me as such. Imagine looking through a broken curved mirror, because you're saying maybe we don't like this metaphor. So, okay, imagine now looking through a curved mirror. The image is distorted, and some things can be clearly made out, while others you can piece together what you're looking at, and then others are a total mystery. So for some things, you're face to face and everything is clear. Other things you're only seeing in part, but not fully. And the last part is basically saying that through God, all things will eventually be seen.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. I think that helps a lot, Frank.
Yeah.
You know?
So my mind keeps going to Rohr's embrace of John of the Cross and the darkness of God and cloud of unknowing. And this is where those glasses truly come off and you allow God to present itself as God would have it. And what do you think about that? I mean, that's here from what I see and read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think that's absolutely what he's talking about. I think, you know, one of the things that Frank just read that I thought was very useful is seeing things in part, seeing things in pieces that don't quite line up yet. You know, you're getting bits and parts, but you're not seeing how the dots connect yet in the endarkenment phase. And then in the enlightenment phase, and they start to connect. It's not that we ever get to the place of certainty, because that's not possible for us as human beings. But what we do get to is a place of conviction where the certainty doesn't matter anymore, or at least not as much. Because what happens in conviction is that trust begins to set in. You have experienced enough of God's nature and the nature of life around you to trust that everything is going to be okay, even when you can't see how those pieces connect yet. And I think that's what starts to set in over time. The process of endarkenment is disturbing to the extent that you still can't quite resolve the whole image, you know? And you'll get flashes of it in enlightenment, and then it goes back into, you know, the glass darkly. But that's sort of the human condition. That's the way it goes. And we're doing these cycle of cycles, right? So we're constantly on a cycle of endarkenment to enlightenment. And that's going to be an ever-going process as well. So it's a complex issue. But I think if we can at least try to separate this spiritual journey, this map of the spiritual journey, from external circumstances that are either good or bad circumstances, painful or not painful, and saying this is more of the internal process and the way that it's experienced, that may help us a little bit to see how, yes, there is this alternation of endarkenment and enlightenment. On the next page, he's going to make the point, and a point that I'm making all the time as well. He calls it momentous, I call it momentary, but the idea is that it is a moment by moment choice and a moment by moment experience that we accumulate, rather than life being one big thing that's binary. It's either on or it's off, it's light or it's dark. No, it's moment by moment choices that we can come in or maybe come further out of focus, but it's the accumulation of those that starts to give life its character, give us our character, our sense of meaning and purpose and identity. Over time is the way that this works. And I don't know if that helps either, but when we get to it, we'll read more about how he puts it.
So I think that there are holy human beings who don't have to have it over, but as an instantaneous awakening. Most wonderful example is Paul on his road to Damascus. There are people, I believe, not me, that simply come to this and know.
Oh, are you saying that Paul's experience on the Damascus Road was instantaneous?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think read the text again, Aurel, because he he has an experience, but remember, the scales are still over his eyes. Remember, there's something like scales over his eyes, and he can't see at all after that experience. He really doesn't know what the heck happened. He knows something happened, and he had the experience of the vision of Jesus. But after that, there's scales over his eyes for days and days and days. Finally, the scales come off. But from there, he goes to Arabia for 14 years before he comes back in a place where he's ready to start his first missionary journey. So there's still a process to it, even though he had this mountaintop experience. So
path events that are transformational, but I appreciate that. That was I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting because each one of the heroes of our faith, as they are presented to us, in either the Old or New Testament, this process is there. You know, they may have a mountaintop experience, but like Elijah on Mount Carmel, he has this huge experience and this victory over the priest of Baal. and then immediately goes into the desert and has to hide and go through another process until he comes out at the cave. And Jesus going into, you know, the wilderness over and over and over again. We see that this process of endarkenment has to take place. There has to be a stripping away. There has to be a time of retreat into those 4 S's: silence, solitude, stillness, and simplicity, before they can come back out again. And then there's an alternation, even though, you know, same thing with Jacob, who becomes Israel, right? And he's going back and forth between the heel catcher and the one who strives with God. His name alternates after he is named Israel throughout the text. So just little clues here that are showing us something about the human condition and showing us about what we should expect as we're trying to go through this journey ourselves, because we have expectations that it's supposed to be this, and then when it's not, then we think we're doing it wrong, or God doesn't love us anymore, or what the heck, you know. But all the clues are there to show us it's not a straightforward process. It's not neat and tidy, you know. It's anything but. But if we persist, if we, with faith, just keep acting as if something's true, even if we don't have the evidence yet, we'll get there. All right, let's try another paragraph here. He says, I believe that God gives us our soul, our deepest identity, our true self, our unique blueprint at our own Immaculate Conception. Okay, any good Catholics there that can tell us what the Immaculate Conception is? Anybody? What's the Immaculate Conception?
The virgin birth.
What's that?
Virgin
Conception.
Virgin birth.
Of whom?
Yeah, 9 months before
Jesus.
that.
It's the Immaculate Conception of whom?
Jesus. Mary by the Holy Spirit.
What's that?
Mary by the Holy Spirit.
Mary's conception or Jesus' conception?
Well, Jesus.
Mary.
Jesus. by the Holy
Mary
Spirit.
conceived Jesus.
Okay, yeah. Actually, it's Mary. Mary was conceived immaculately. That's the idea in Catholic theology, because if Jesus was really the sinless one, then Mary had to be free from original sin in order to bear him as the sinless one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the Immaculate Conception actually is about Mary. Yeah. So he's saying, so this is what he's setting up here. I believe that God gives us our soul, our deepest identity, our true self, our unique blueprint at our own Immaculate Conception. So basically what he's saying here is that we are born with this blueprint, this perfect blueprint of our soul. So he's kind of negating the idea of original sin here, isn't he? That's what it sounds like. He's saying we are born as this, with this perfect blueprint. We're not born into depravity. We're not born completely separated from God. In other words, the things that we become are learned. They are something that happens to us afterwards, but we're not born that way. And
Is that to imply that conception from the Father brought the original sin? And therefore, since it wasn't a man, there was no original sin? What's the, because Mary was obviously flesh and blood.
Right.
So why was there no original sin through Immaculate Conception?
It's kind of an extension of it, an extrapolation, I guess. If Jesus was born perfectly without sin as the perfect eventual sacrifice, then Mary couldn't have been contributing to him in terms of her own original sin. So she was immaculately conceived as well. I mean, it's a theological point. We don't have to believe in it. You know, I'm just saying that's kind of what he's referring to here, that not only was she immaculately conceived, he's saying basically we all are. God is giving us a soul that's a perfect blueprint. You know, so he's not buying into the idea of original sin here, is basically what he's saying. But this is, you know, that's sort of a side point. You know, you get it for free and you can do whatever you want with it. But it's an interesting point that he's making, because it does fly in the face of typical Western theology, you know, that includes the idea of of original sin that we're born with. So then he goes on. Our unique little bit of heaven is installed by the manufacturer within the product at the beginning. All right, he's talking about us, right? Our unique little bit of heaven, this blueprint, our soul, is installed by the manufacturer within the product at the beginning. We are given a span of years to discover it, to choose it, and to live our own destiny to the full. So you get where he's going with this? We are already born with the kingdom person within us, you know, this perfect blueprint, this part of us that is created in God's image. And I've used the analogy of Michelangelo, and he used to say that when he was commissioned to do a sculpture, and he was standing and looking at the block of marble that he was going to sculpt, he would imagine the sculpture, let's say it's a horse, standing in the block of marble, fully formed. And when he would walk around that block and he could see it perfectly in there as if it were frozen in a block of ice, to every last vein and muscle and hair, then the only thing that was left to do was remove everything that wasn't the horse. In a sense, this is where we're going here. We're born with this perfect blueprint. We're born with this perfect soul. We're born with this perfect kingdom person, all right, in us. Now, over time, that gets layered over with all the hurts and all the traumas and everything else that has been experienced in life. At the point that we start this work, at the point that we start this journey, the second half of life journey, our task is to remove everything that is not that perfect blueprint. It's not about acquiring something that we don't have in order to become fulfilled or completed. It's about removing everything that is covering over what was always there from the beginning. It's a completely different way of looking at it, 180 degrees. It has to do with what we've been talking about the last few Sundays. Are we starting from a place of need, or are we starting from a place of abundance? Jesus is always starting from abundance. Everything that I have, the father of the prodigal says to the elder brother, is yours. It's already here. You know, you don't have to go looking for it, and you don't have to take it out of your brother's hide in order to have something that you already have. Why are we still striving for things that we already possess? It's a complete shift in worldview that Jesus is trying to get us to make, so that we're digging in the right spot as we really enter a conscious and intentional following of Jesus' way to the Father. It's subtraction and not addition. It's a completely different way of looking at it. And for my money, he's saying the same thing here. Our unique little bit of heaven is installed by the manufacturer within the product, within us, at the beginning. We're given a span of years to discover it, to choose it, and to live our own destiny to the full. If we do not, our true self will never be offered again in our own unique form, which is perhaps why almost all religious traditions present the matter with utterly charged words like heaven and hell. See what he's saying there? Each one of us is absolutely unique. This marriage of body and soul, personality, the way that we are wired egoically, the whole package of us as a human being and our soul is utterly unique and will never appear again. And it's up to us to go through and do the work of opening that soul back up, bringing it back out into the light, presenting it back to God as a living sacrifice, whatever you want to use as the metaphor for what we're doing here. He says, because if we don't, it'll never appear again in this particular form. That's an interesting idea. And I don't know if you agree with it or not, but it is an interesting idea. And then he, with this last line, which is perhaps why almost all religious traditions present the matter with utterly charged words like heaven and hell, speaking to the finality of this particular form of us. I'm trying to parse his words a little bit, but I don't know if that brings up any kind of William-esque devil's advocate ideas here, but feel free to throw some out if you'd like to.
Okay, first of all, except where we get to never be offered again. This is pure Dhyana Chan Zen Buddhism here. Goes all the way back to Taoism. It would be helpful at times if he gave credit to these the schools of thought that have, for thousands of years, held the idea that we are born in an abundance, a sense of perfect life, and things just get thrown over the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
We come that we're not, we're imperfect, we have lots of character defects. So I love this part of it. I don't know if it'll never be offered again. Perhaps if he means as concretized within our own flesh and blood at this moment, or if he's talking about a one and only chance to step into part 2 of life, the spiritual awakening. So I don't know what he means here. I've found that this is, well, I don't know, I'll set that out.
Yeah. Well, I think he is talking about our own actual incarnation. This combination of who we are won't see the light of day again if we don't, I guess, perfect it, complete it, bring our soul back out from underneath the covering that has been accrued over the course of our lives. And how can you prove it? It's kind of speculation on his part. You can take it or leave it. I just found it was an interesting idea, right? He goes on.
Well, Dave, do you think he means more like you won't be able to have it here while we have our body? I mean, I don't think he's saying after we leave this earth. I'm just wondering if that's what he's saying is, he's saying unless we grab onto it while we're on this earth, we're missing out on that opportunity here on this earth. But once we die, then another opportunity is going to happen, but it's just going to be without our body attached.
Yeah, I think what he's also saying is not just for us, it's for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
This unique combination is a gift to the world. It's a gift to everyone we meet. It's a gift to every community that we're a part of. If we can actually uncover that perfect blueprint, that little bit of heaven, as he calls it, and let it shine forth, as Jesus would say, let your light so shine before men, right? And we can offer that gift in this unique form to the world if we can do this work. If we don't, it'll be covered over and it's not going to come back in this particular form. I don't know if any of you believe in reincarnation, that there's multiple lifetimes in which to get our work done, but he's saying that, I guess, regardless of whether you do or not, this particular combination is not going to come back. This was the luck of the draw that we are inhabiting right now. And it's an absolute gift, not only to ourselves, but to everyone around us, if we can do this work. And I think it's along those lines that he's talking.
I have, this is Ellen, I have a different interpretation when it says, we're born with a unique blueprint, but it's up to us during the years to discover it, choose it, during the span of our lifetime. But if we don't, our true self will never be offered again. But to me, it's like, my God is a God of second chances. Like, I did things wrong and imperfect, but there's redemption, or there's also the forgiveness of others. There's, one can, transformation of the mind, where not that your being was changed, but one can be changed, and it's not all or nothing till the end of my life.
So what he's not talking about here, though, Ellen, is damnation. He's not talking about heaven and hell. He's not talking about if we don't do this, then we're damned, or we're going to be out of God's favor. He's just saying that we aren't going to be able to shine the way that we can shine in this life and be there for other people and to be that light. So I guess that would be confusing as well. I didn't take it that way because I know where Rohr is coming from, outside of the writing of this book, and that wouldn't be his take on it. But, basically, we're spending a lot of time here, maybe unnecessarily so. If this doesn't feel like a positive motivation to want to do this work, then I'd say put it on the shelf and don't listen to it anymore. You know, I think what he's trying to do is saying, look, you have been given this beautiful opportunity in this unique package that you are. The world has never seen you, any of us before, and will never again. This is our unique opportunity to bring this to the fore. And if we will do the second half of life work, that's what will happen. And that little bit of heaven will be on display and will be helpful to everyone. But he's not talking about heaven or hell or damnation. It's just about being able to actually break through to the freedom that Jesus is talking about if we follow his ways. So if that is a positive motivation about your uniqueness and what you can bring, then great. If not, never mind. How about that? Let's go on a little bit more. Our soul's discovery is utterly crucial, momentous, and of pressing importance for each of us and for the world. See where he's going with this? He's trying to build up this sense of who we are. None of us are nothing. None of us are unworthy. None of us were made by mistake. We are all this utterly beautiful creation, but it is up to us to bring that back out. We do not make or create our souls. We just grow them up. We are the clumsy stewards of our souls. We are charged to awaken. And much of the work of spirituality is learning how to stay out of the way of this rather natural growing and awakening. We need to unlearn a lot, it seems, to get back to that foundational life which is hidden in God. And he references Colossians 3:3. Yes, transformation is often more about unlearning than learning, which is why the religious traditions call it conversion or repentance. For me, no poet says this quite so perfectly as the literally inimitable Gerard Manley Hopkins in his Duns Scotus-inspired poem, As Kingfishers Catch Fire. And this poem in the English is a little opaque. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being, indoors each one dwells. Selves, goes itself. Myself, it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. That cleared it all up, didn't it?
No.
Especially for Frank out there with no book to look at. I bet, yeah, that went over really well. So what he's basically saying is each mortal thing does one thing. So each person does one thing and the same thing. It brings out, he says deals out, brings out that being which dwells indoors, interiorly in each person, in each one, right? Ourselves goes itself. Myself, it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. In other words, to unveil that true self, to bring it back out again. This is the universal purpose that all of us are here for that I came. And that's the best I can do to interpret that one. But it goes along with, obviously, what Rohr is saying here. All we can give back and all God wants from any of us is to humbly and proudly return the product that we have been given, which is ourselves. If I am to believe the saints and mystics, this finished product is more valuable to God than it seemingly is to us. Whatever this mystery is, we are definitely in on the deal. True religion is always a deep intuition that we are already participating in something very good, in spite of our best efforts to deny it or avoid it. In fact, the best of modern theology is revealing a strong turn toward participation, as opposed to religion as mere observation, affirmation, moralism, or group belonging. There is nothing to join, only something to recognize, suffer, and enjoy as a participant. You are already in the eternal flow that Christians would call the divine life of the Trinity. Now remember the Trinity as Rohr would define it, and as the Cappadocian Fathers defined it early in the church in the 2nd century, is a kind of a blur of participation. The perichoresis was the circle dance, the spinning dance that was around at that time. And so they understood the 3 persons of the Trinity as in this blur of motion constantly. There was never a time when there wasn't motion. There wasn't an internal relational connection and participation and movement, always movement. And so what he's saying is that our participation in that movement is everything. It's not about just joining a religious group, to observe and affirm or to moralize or just to belong, but to actually participate. And this is taking that next step. This is what I'm always trying to affirm, and that the effect that we're trying to get people to engage and actually participate in their own journey. Because until that happens, then really nothing is happening. You're collecting data, but until the participation kicks in, then there really isn't the journey that Jesus is talking about. And so it's this turn toward participation as opposed to religion as mere observation that really makes all the difference, to be part of the flow.
Well, I absolutely love that whole thing. It's just very powerful for me. All on a stream. Jump in and go with it.
I was writing the blog post for last Sunday, and I used a quote from Frank Herbert and Dune, and I'm not going to get it exactly right. It's really good. So let me see if I can pull it up real quick here, because it deals directly with what we're just talking about. Let's see. A process cannot be understood by stopping it. Okay? A process cannot be understood by stopping it. Understanding must move with the flow of the process, must join it and flow with it. God is a process. The idea of Trinity is a process. It's that constant movement. It's that flowing, that dance between the personalities of the Godhead. The Jews understood spirit as wind, breath, and spirit at the same time. It was always about movement, always about a process. And so joining with the flow of it is the only way that we're really going to understand what it is we're dealing with. Life is a process. It's always in motion. If we're not in motion with the process, then we're lost. And as soon as you think about something, as soon as you form a thought, that thought is a snapshot of a process, but it's a still image. And so it can't be a part of the process. Our error is to think that we can understand something that is a process by thinking about it. And we're only really going to understand it when we're flowing with the process. And that's what religion is supposed to be doing for us. We've screwed it up royally, but religion is supposed to be making everyone as a funnel into the process, allowing them, giving them tools, giving them ritual, giving them prayers, giving them experiences that are funneling us into the flow of the process. But it becomes an end in itself, and then it becomes static, and then it's dead. So this is the idea here. Can we be part of the process? If we want to find our true selves, if we want to do the second half of life, we have to do it by being participants in the flow of a process, as opposed to first half of life that can be conceptual. But that is a clean break between the two. Now, obviously, we need both, and it is a balance. But we're kidding ourselves if we think that we're going to be on the spiritual journey without being part of the flow, which means we're going to be risking something, because in the flow, we're not in control. And that is the fear that we always have of taking on the second half of life journey. We're not in control anymore. We're just enjoying the ride or not, but we're not in control. Let's read a little bit more. We'll finish this. Whether we find our true self depends in large part on the moments of time we are each allotted and the moments of freedom that we each receive and choose during that time. Now, when I read that, it didn't seem real fair to me. Whether we find our true self depends in large part on the moments of time we are each allotted. So if some of us die too young, then we don't get to do this work. I mean, I see what he's saying, you know, but I have to believe that each one of us has equal opportunity. God is an equal opportunity employer, okay? We each have equal opportunity. Somehow, I don't know how it works when some people die so young, but it has to work that way. There has to be equal opportunity in some way that we don't understand. So whether we find our true self depends in large part on the moments of time we are each allotted and the moments of freedom that we each receive and choose during that time. Life is indeed momentous, created by accumulated moments in which the deeper I is slowly revealed if we are ready to see it. So that is what I was talking about before. He calls it momentous. I've called it momentary. You can decide if either one of those are clearer for you. But my analogy has always been a string of pearls. You know, we have a necklace if we have enough pearls on the string. But really, it's not just a necklace or not. It's, are we going to keep sliding pearls on the string? Each moment that we allow ourselves to break through and have that moment of enlightenment, that moment of presence, where we let down everything that would keep us, be a block to that, then we're putting another pearl on the string. Eventually, we get to 51%. And we have enough pearls on the string that we can say, yes, we have a necklace. I have changed my character at this point. And then you—
What is the string that ties the pearls together?
Oh, now you're going to take the metaphor too far, Rel. Come on,
Oh,
man.
it's important. That's a big deal.
Oh, okay. I don't know, man. What do you think the string is? The string is our overall allotment of time between birth and death, the time we get to spend between heaven and earth, maybe. You know, if you really want to go out there.
I can tell you what Ramakrishna, the Dantic Society says, is that they accept all these religions as pearls of great price and truth, and that their perspective is that all of those together are strung on what constitutes God and love. But I don't know, it's a big question to me. I've heard it a lot, but not within the context of Christianity.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't really taken the metaphor that far. I'll have to think on that. What is the string?
Well, Frank's going to help get back to me tomorrow from Texas.
All right. The pearls are the moments, the choices we make within our moments. And as we accumulate those, as he's saying, life is indeed momentous. It's momentary, created by accumulated moments in which the deeper I is slowly revealed if we're ready to see it. Holding our inner blueprint, which is a good description of our soul, and returning it humbly to the world and to God by love and service is indeed of ultimate concern. Each thing and every person must act out its nature fully, at whatever cost. It is our life's purpose and the deepest meaning of natural law. We are here to give back fully and freely what was first given to us, but now writ personally by us. It is probably the most courageous and free act we will ever perform, and it takes both halves of our life to do it fully. The first half of life is discovering the script, and the second half of life is actually writing it and owning it. So kind of the content and the container idea, that the first half of life is building the container. The second half of life is finding the content to fill the container with true meaning and purpose. You know, the external and the internal halves and back again. So get ready for a great adventure, the one you were really born for. If we never get to our little bit of heaven, our life does not make much sense, and we have created our own hell. So get ready for some new freedom, some dangerous permission, some hope from nowhere, some unexpected happiness, some stumbling stones, some radical grace, and some new and pressing responsibility for yourself and for our suffering world. And that's as far as we're going this evening. Thoughts on any of that?
That was really nice.
By the way, hi, Lindy. Good to see you. And Doug, I didn't properly say hi to you.
There was a thing that came up that said we only had 23 minutes left.
So done.
Were you guys talking to us or to each other?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we were talking about our battery might be dying. So
we can hear you. Be careful what you say. We can hear you.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry, everybody.
Okay, so that gets us through the kind of the introduction to the introduction. And this is the invitation to the further journey. And now we'll next week we'll actually get into the formal introduction. But hopefully that illuminates a few things. If any of the things that we talked about tonight or even last week kind of burns a hole in your pocket, then please write it down and bring it next week. We can start with that because sometimes questions get left unanswered and they kind of just sit there and rankle. So I want to address those things as much as we can. So we got a clean slate to work with each week here. Okay.
Can you?
Yeah. And no burning desire, final thoughts here?
I have one.
Go for
I think Linda was trying to speak.
Okay, Brady then.
No, Linda first.
Okay, Linda first, then Brady.
I'm sorry to get this all going, but what page did you stop on tonight? You know?
Well, that's an easy question to answer. That is 12.
Thank you.
Roman numeral 12. So
Thank
just the end of the that section. Okay, Brady.
So it just occurred to me halfway through that, I started reading it in a particular way, just reminding myself that Rohr is directing his statements to not the true self, not the soul, but to people. And his message is not about the nature of the soul, but he's talking to people. And so if life is momentous in pieces, in moments, and elements, that's the way people live life. If God is a process, it seems that the soul would be a process. And so I think he's in that section, he's talking about that somehow people in these moments and these sequences and these pieces can develop, learn, grow, learn from the nature of the soul, the nature of God, in the course of developing this, I don't know what you call it, this eventual person who's really actualized.
And you know, it's interesting because he talks about growing the soul, but really what he was talking about is that the soul is already perfectly formed at the beginning. And what we're doing is really revealing the soul. So growing the soul is really more about revealing what is already there, removing the parts that obscure the soul, so that the person that you're talking about, this person, is completely integrated then. You know, there are no false parts anymore. And everything is of a piece and working together. So it's a little bit of a mixing of metaphors, I think, to a certain degree, where we're kind of stepping over ourselves. But the way that I understand it and the way that it's clearest to me is that idea that each of these momentous decisions that we make, each of these moments where we do break through, we're revealing more and more of who we really are. We're getting back to that original iteration, if you will, as a child, which then dovetails with what Jesus said about kingdom, being the child being the emblem of that.
So isn't it when Mr. Anderson asked, what is the chain that puts all these little pearls together? Isn't it me? So I put my moments together and then it makes me grow and mature.
That could work.
In the person I could be.
Yeah, that could work. Maybe it's our consciousness. Maybe that's what we're stringing our moments on, is our consciousness. Maybe that's the thread that holds it all together. I mean, come up with that part of the metaphor that works for you. Remember, all of these are just metaphors. They're just word pictures. They're just creating a structure or a paradigm that allows you to move forward toward your own personal convictions. This is not hard and fast. These are tools for you to use. And if they're not helping, then you jettison immediately because they're not helping, you know. And even like Rohr said, You know, this glass is still just made of human hands, even his words, his book here. It's just a way of seeing. If it's not helping, then take what you need and leave the rest. Okie dokie. All right. Frank, since you're here, Frank, Texas Frank. See, I hesitate to call you Frank too. Scott's been doing our closing prayer, but will you do a closing prayer for us?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this group. Thank you for the ability to seek you, search for you, seek to understand our journey and how to put it together. And thank you for this group that does it together, that seeks you and seeks to understand you and seeks to emulate you every day in our lives. So we thank you, we love you, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Amen. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here
you.
tonight.
Good
Thanks,
session, guys.
everybody. Good night.
Good night. Hey, Francis K. I see you.
Good night.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marcia and Keith.
Bye,
All right, guys. Everybody have a good night.
See you soon.
Bye, Scott.
Good night.
Okay, Linda, I'll see you Saturday. Jordana, I'll see you Sunday.
Yes, you will.
And Doug, hopefully I'll see you. Oh, I won't see you Sunday. How long are you in Utah, Doug?
I come back Saturday, so I'll probably see you Sunday. Here's some snow, by the way.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So cool.
That is so cool. Yeah, I forgot to tell everybody you're in Utah. That's great.
Yeah, I went to a meeting and then I noticed the time with the time difference, so I tuned in. So a little hard to follow when tuning in late, but
and
it was good.
Did you have a book with you? You don't have a book, right?
I have it on my iPad, so I caught up, but
Okay.
I got to read the thing carefully and then tune in. It was hard to catch up in the middle of it.
Yeah,
You know, it was a little bit out there. So I got bits and pieces, but I got to stare at it for like an hour, I think, or maybe 30 minutes.
Okay, man. You be safe up there. Don't get too cold. All
Bye,
right.
Linda.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.